Gareth stood at the dinner table with his glass raised and his smile already arranged for maximum effect. He looked around slowly, collecting the room's attention the way he always collected things, deliberately, with the certainty of someone who expected no resistance. "This family has one winner," he said. His eyes moved to my stepbrother Asher, who straightened in his chair like someone who had been waiting all evening for exactly this acknowledgement. Then Gareth's gaze slid to me. And one mistake. The word landed like something thrown from close range, clean and deliberate and designed to leave a mark. A couple of laughs stumbled out, the uncomfortable kind. People not sure whether they were supposed to find it funny and defaulting to the sound anyway. My mom's smile twitched, stayed in place through visible effort. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I felt heat climb up my neck. My chest tightened in the specific way that happened when something hit before your body had time to prepare for the impact. Gareth leaned back in his chair, satisfied. "No one knows I tell it like it is," he said. My hands were shaking under the tablecloth. I forced a small smile, because if I reacted, he would win twice. But inside something went completely still and sharp. He had just declared war over a legacy he never built and never earned. "My name is Noah Bexley. I learned early that grief made you easy to bully. When my dad died, I was 17. The world had a hole in it where he had been. The size and shape of that hole was something I couldn't describe to anyone who hadn't lost a parent. You tried and the words came out wrong. The loss was too specific." Gareth arrived the following year. Charming in public, easy with compliments. The kind of man who seemed helpful until you lived inside the help long enough to feel its conditions. In the bathroom after the toast, I gripped the sink and looked at my face, checking that I was still there, that the comment hadn't erased something. I could hear the dining room through the wall. Asher's voice. Gareth's laugh. My phone vibrated, a text from my mom. "Please don't start anything tonight." I read it twice, like the insult was weather, and I was the one who might ruin the evening by reacting to being rained on. I set the phone on the edge of the sink and looked at my reflection until my breathing slowed. I wasn't going to start anything tonight, but I was going to finish something. That much was decided. My mom cornered me in the kitchen when I brought plates in. She had a dish towel in both hands. Her eyes were doing the thing they did when she needed me to cooperate with something she knew was wrong. "He didn't mean it," she whispered. I almost laughed. The specific, involuntary laugh of hearing something so familiar, it bypassed sadness and landed somewhere darker. Gareth always meant it. The difference was he deployed it selectively, in front of audiences where the cruelty could be framed as honesty. "It hurt," I said. My mom flinched, like I had said something rude rather than something true. "Noah, he's under a lot of stress." Her word for the space between Gareth's actions and accountability. I nodded, said nothing else. Started rinsing plates because the motion gave my hands something to do. Then I heard Gareth's voice carrying from the dining room. He was talking about the properties, the rental units, the contracts. He said our, every time. Our properties, our portfolio, our income. My dad had spent 23 years building Bexley Builds and Rentals from a single duplex and a truck with 110,000 miles on it. Gareth had arrived after it was already standing. Our. My stomach turned slowly. Asher found me near the refrigerator after everyone had settled into the living room. He had the particular energy of someone who had been given a gift and wanted me to acknowledge it. "Don't take it personally," he said. The smirk was already in place. Practiced. "Gareth just tells it like it is." "So do I said quietly. The smirk faltered slightly, recalibrated. Asher leaned against the counter. "Look, you should be grateful he stayed. He could have walked away and left your mom with nothing." "Nothing." I looked at him. He believed it. That was the part that stopped me for a moment. The belief in his voice was genuine. He had absorbed the story Gareth had told him so completely, it had become the version he operated from. Gareth as the rescuer. My mom as the woman who would have collapsed without him. Me as the difficulty. Dad's company as something that needed saving, rather than something that had been running without Gareth for years before he inserted himself into its management. Asher walked away with his shoulders back, the posture of someone whose position had been confirmed. I stood by the refrigerator and understood something cold and specific. Asher wasn't just the winner in Gareth's story. He was the weapon. The next morning, I sat at my laptop while the house was still quiet. Opened the company files I'd been managing for 3 years. Bexley Builds and Rentals. My father's company. The thing he'd built from one property and an idea about how housing should work. Reliable, honest, never more than he could do well. After he died, someone had to handle the administration. Gareth wasn't interested in that part. He was interested in the meetings where people shook his hand and the events where he could describe himself as a businessman. I'd been doing the actual work. Invoices, tenant communications, vendor relationships, permit applications. Late-night emails when something broke and a tenant needed a response before morning. I scrolled through 18 months of email threads. My name was on everything, every approval, every negotiation, every time something went wrong at 11:30 and needed to be addressed before it got worse. Then I saw something I hadn't seen before. A forwarded email thread. Recent, 2 weeks old. Subject line I hadn't been included in. The words transferring managerial control sat in the preview. My stomach dropped in one clean fall. Gareth was moving behind my back, and I had almost missed it entirely. I tried to log in to the business banking portal the following morning. Error message. Invalid credentials. I tried twice more. Same result. I sat with my hands very still on the keyboard. Then called the bank. The representative was polite, professional. She explained that authorized access had been updated on the account. Updated, I said. By who? She said she couldn't share that information over the phone without the account holder present. I already knew who. I drove to the office storage unit afterward. The one where we kept older paper records, original contracts, my father's working files from the early years of the company. The padlock had been changed. I stood in the parking lot of the storage facility and felt something move through me that was past anger, past fear, past the stage where I was still adjusting to the size of what Gareth was doing. That evening, my mom said carefully, not quite meeting my eyes, Gareth thinks it's more efficient if he manages the business side now. He doesn't know the business side, I said. He's your stepfather, she said, voice shaking. He deserves respect. I looked at her. She was confusing respect with surrender. The way she'd been confusing those two things for years. I drove to the job site where Dale was working. Dale had been my father's foreman for 16 years. He had the hands of someone who had built things. The voice of someone who said what was true. He looked up when I climbed out of my car. Looked at my face. You look tired, kid, he said. I told him what Gareth was doing, the password change, the forwarded email, the lock on the storage unit. Dale's jaw tightened while he listened. The specific tightening of a man controlling a response he wanted to make at a different volume. Your dad would roll in his grave, he said finally. Low. Certain. Then he looked at me. Your dad told me once you were the brain of the whole operation. Said when he was gone, you'd be the one keeping it steady. My eyes burned. I pressed my lips together. I want to help, Dale said, without being asked, before I could figure out how to ask. I know where the old records are, contracts, payroll going back to the beginning, everything that shows who was actually running what. I nodded, couldn't speak for a moment. For the first time in weeks, I was standing in a conversation where someone already understood what I needed. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Gareth called a family meeting. He sat at the head of the table with documents in front of him and the posture of someone presenting results to a board. Asher sat beside him, slightly straightened. My mom sat across from them with her hands folded. We need structure, Gareth said. Real structure. Asher is going to start learning the business. He's the future of it. Asher nodded like this had already been agreed. Then Gareth slid a document across the table toward my mom. Power of attorney over business decisions, I said calmly. Let me read that before anyone signs anything. Gareth smiled, the patient smile he used for things he'd already decided. You wouldn't understand the legal language. I held his gaze. Try me. The smile twitched. He pulled the document back. We're not making this a debate, he said. I watched my mom's hand. It was hovering near the table, near where the document had been. Her fingers were trembling. She looked at me, eyes asking me to stop, asking me to let it go, asking me to pay the price again. I looked at Gareth. He wasn't just trying to take a business, he was trying to take her capacity to think for herself. Both things at once. Dale gave me the name of a business attorney. Iris Penn had an office 2 towns over and a reputation for handling exactly the kind of estate dispute that happened when families and businesses intersected badly. I brought everything I had: my father's original operating agreement, 3 years of emails documenting my role in running the company, tax filings, vendor communications, my name on approvals and contracts, and correspondence going back to the month after my dad died. Iris listened through all of it without interrupting. Then she asked one question. "Whose name is on ownership?" My stomach tightened. "My mom's," I said, "and my dad's estate had provisions, a management structure that was built into the original agreement." Iris nodded, carefully. "So Gareth's ability to take control depends entirely on what he can pressure your mother into signing." Pressure. The word sat in the air between us. I nodded. "We can protect the assets," Iris said. "We can invoke the estate provisions and put legal guardrails around anything that requires ownership authorization." She paused. "But you have to be willing to draw a line and hold it." I thought about my mom's trembling hand, about Gareth's smile. "I'm ready," I said, and I meant it completely. Iris sent a formal notice to the bank and the property manager. It cited estate provisions and fiduciary duty, required that any changes to account access or business decisions be reviewed before taking effect, named the estate's management structure as the applicable authority. When Gareth received his copy, he came to my room without knocking. He was holding the letter, face red, the easy confidence replaced with something rawer. "What is this?" he said. "It's protection," I said. He laughed, one short, hard sound. "Protection from who? I'm the one keeping this family afloat." I stayed quiet, because arguing with the lie wasn't the point. The letter wasn't asking his opinion. Gareth stepped closer. His voice dropped, the specific register he used when he wanted to make sure a message was received personally. "You want to play grown-up games?" he said. "I can make your mother choose." My stomach dropped. Not from surprise. I'd known he would reach for that eventually. From the confirmation of something I had hoped wasn't true. He knew exactly where the pressure point was. He had always known, and he had always been willing to use it. I waited until he left. Then I sat on my bed and kept building. I found my mom in the laundry room. She was standing with her back against the dryer and her hands over her face, crying the way she cried when she was trying not to be heard. I closed the door behind me. "Why are you doing this to us?" she whispered, not accusingly, just exhausted. Like the question had been sitting in her for weeks. "He's taking what Dad built," I said, gently. As gently as I could say something that was also absolutely true. She flinched when I said Dad. Like the name was a wound that hadn't healed. "I can't lose another husband," she whispered. And there it was. The thing that made Gareth's control work. Underneath the paperwork, underneath the access changes and the manipulation. He controlled her with fear, with the terror of being alone again, with the specific vulnerability of a woman who had lost the person she loved and had let someone else step into the space that loss had left. I took her hands. "You're not losing anyone," I said. "You're recognizing a bully." She shook her head, afraid. Then Gareth's voice came from the hallway. "Are you turning her against me?" And my mom went quiet and small, like someone who had been taught that going quiet was how you survived. I pulled up the vendor portal, went through 3 months of payment records, found the gap, payments that should have gone to suppliers, invoiced amounts with no corresponding outflows to the correct accounts. I called one of the suppliers directly, asked carefully whether there had been any changes to how they submitted invoices. The supplier hesitated, then said, "We were told to bill a different account." A contact said it was for accounting purposes. My blood went cold. I asked for the contact name. She gave me an email address. Gareth's personal email. He was rerouting vendor payments from the business account to somewhere else. That night, Asher posted on social media a photo of himself at the office with a caption about learning the family empire. Multiple heart reactions. Multiple congratulations. Empire. My father had never called it an empire. He called it the business. Said it with a plain, honest word for a plain, honest thing. I screenshot Asher's post, screenshot the vendor email, Screenshot the payment discrepancy records. Put them in the folder I'd been building. Gareth was siphoning money, and he was doing it with the specific confidence of someone who believed nobody was watching. Trails didn't care about confidence. Trails just sat there and waited. A tenant called my personal number on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was shaking before she finished saying hello. She'd received an eviction notice, 30 days. Effective immediately. The notice said failure to maintain property standards. I pay on time every month, she said. I've been there 4 years. I don't understand. I pulled up her file while she was still on the phone. Perfect payment history. 0 complaints. A single maintenance request 11 months ago that had been handled within a week. I called the property manager after I ended the call with her. The property manager said Gareth had ordered the eviction. The plan was to renovate the unit and raise rent by 40%. The tenant was a single mother. Her son was in 2nd grade 2 blocks from the property. I hung up and sat for a while. My hands were cold. This wasn't about my pride anymore. Hadn't been for a while, but now I felt it with a different clarity. Gareth was hurting people. Real people who had done nothing wrong and had built their routines and their children's routines around a stable address. He was disrupting their lives to extract more money from property he hadn't built and didn't understand. He had just given me the cleanest possible reason to stop him. It wasn't about inheritance. It was about ethics. I parked outside the office storage unit on a Thursday morning. Gareth's truck was already there. I sat in my car with the window cracked. The storage unit door wasn't fully latched. His voice carried through the gap. He was on speakerphone. Once it's fully in Asher's name, she's got nothing, he said. The easy laugh in his voice. The laugh of someone explaining something that had already been decided. I held my phone up and pressed record. She's emotional, Gareth continued. Courts don't favor emotional girls who make everything a fight. My jaw tightened. I kept my hands steady. And her mother will sign whatever I put in front of her. She's terrified of being alone. I've known that since the beginning. The last sentence landed in me slowly. Since the beginning. He had known from the beginning, had identified her vulnerability and built his entire strategy around it. Had selected her grief as the entry point for everything that followed. I pressed stop on the recording. Saved it immediately. Sent a copy to my own email. My hands were shaking, but my mind was completely steady. Gareth had just said every quiet thing out loud, and he had absolutely no idea he had been heard. Gareth made the announcement at dinner. If I didn't stop interfering with business decisions, I was no longer welcome to live in the house. He delivered it calmly. With the authority of someone who had decided the terms and was informing rather than negotiating. My mom's face went pale. I looked at her, waited. Held the space where her response should have been. She whispered, Noah, maybe you could just take a step back. Step back. Like backward was the direction available to me. Like retreating from my own father's company while Gareth dismantled it was a reasonable thing to ask of me. My throat tightened. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Gareth's smile arrived. Satisfied. The smile of someone who had just gotten the compliance they needed. But what I had decided wasn't compliance. If the safety of my home depended on my silence, then it had never been safe. That night I got out my bags, started packing quietly, the practical things, the things I'd need. When Gareth walked past my room and saw the open suitcase, he stopped. His expression changed. He had expected me to beg, had built his ultimatum on the assumption that threatening my home would fold me. He hadn't expected me to simply leave. I kept packing. The apartment was small. Mismatched furniture from different decades, a window that looked out at a brick wall and a narrow strip of sky above it. It was completely quiet. Dale helped me move the essentials in his truck, carried boxes without being asked, set up the small desk where I'd work. Your dad would be proud, he said. I cried, the honest kind. Not the controlled version I'd been using for months to keep my face neutral in difficult rooms. Dale sat with it without trying to fix it, the way someone sat with grief who had also carried some of it himself. Then my phone rang. Iris, I have good news, she said. Gareth's attempted transfer of managerial control triggered an automatic legal review. The estate provisions include a protective clause that activates when any party attempts to reassign ownership authority without court approval. My stomach lifted. So he can't just do it, I said. Not without challenging the estate in court, Iris confirmed, and he'd have to explain his accounting to a judge first. I looked around the small apartment, the brick wall, the narrow sky. Iris said, he will escalate. I thought about the recording on my phone. Let him, I said. Asher knocked on my apartment door on a Saturday morning. He came alone. No Gareth, no practiced confidence. He looked tired in a way that suggested the tiredness had been building for a while, and he was only now letting it show. Gareth says you're trying to destroy us, he said. I looked at him, not with anger, with something more patient. Do you know what you're actually signing? I asked. He hesitated. I got the documents Iris had prepared. The explanation of what the proposed transfer actually did. Control reassigned. Oversight removed. My mom's ability to review or dispute decisions eliminated. Asher read. His face tightened on the second page. Why would he need to eliminate oversight? Asher asked. Because he's rerouting vendor payments, I said. And he's evicting a tenant to raise rent by 40%. And he's been telling contractors he started a company my father built over 23 years. Asher swallowed. Looked away. He said you were jealous, he said. Voice smaller. I'm grieving, I said. My dad is gone, and someone is dismantling what he built. That's different from jealous. Asher left without answering. But his face when he left was different from when he arrived. The winner was starting to see the cage he was standing in, a local business mixer. The kind of event where people networked and handed out cards and described themselves in terms designed to impress. Gareth attended, posted photos. One showed him shaking hands with a city official. Caption, proud to grow what I built. Built. Dale messaged me a screenshot, then called. He told 3 people tonight that he started the company, Dale said, was describing the founding like he was there. Iris called the following morning with a specific warning. If he's making public claims about being the founder, he's establishing a public narrative of ownership, she said. It's groundwork. If enough people believe he built it, it becomes harder to argue he doesn't belong in control of it. I understood. Gareth wasn't just working through paperwork. He was working through story, building a version of events that would be believed by anyone who hadn't been paying close attention. And most people weren't paying close attention. That was the exploit. The gap between the version he told publicly and the documented truth of who had actually done what. I decided I wasn't going to fight him in private conversations anymore. If he wanted an audience for his performance, I was going to make sure the audience saw the full show. Gareth called a meeting with vendors and contractors. He introduced Asher as the future director of operations, the energy of someone passing a torch to an heir. Iris told me I could attend, so I did, quietly, in a chair near the back where I wasn't the center of anything. Gareth spoke with the confidence of someone who had memorized enough vocabulary to sound credible in a meeting room. But he used terms incorrectly, made timeline promises that anyone who understood the work knew were impossible. Contractors exchanged looks across the table. When a vendor asked about 3 overdue payments, Gareth's voice cooled. We're restructuring, he said. You'll be paid on my schedule. The room temperature dropped. Then Dale, who had been quiet in the corner, said simply and calmly, that's not how this company worked under the man who built it. Gareth's jaw tightened. He's gone, he said. The cruelty in it deliberate. A reminder. A claim over the absence. Nobody laughed. Nobody smiled. People looked at Gareth with the specific expression of someone recalibrating. Revising something they'd been accepting, and finding the revised version difficult to look at directly. For the first time, Gareth's charm had failed to perform. My mom came to my apartment on a Wednesday night. She knocked instead of calling first. That told me something before I opened the door. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking in a way that had moved past nervous into something deeper. I made tea. Sat with her. She told me Gareth had screamed at her for asking about a bank statement, not raised his voice, screamed. The word she used was screamed, and she said it carefully like she was still deciding whether to believe it had happened. He was tracking her spending, commenting on every purchase, using the word ungrateful. I think I made a mistake, she said. The word mistake, said about her choice of him, said by the woman whose daughter he had publicly called a mistake at a dinner table full of family. The echo of it moved through me. "You're allowed to change your mind," I said. My mom cried, deep and frightened. "He says if I leave, he'll take everything," she whispered. I took her hands. "He can't take what he didn't build," I said. She looked at me, wanting to believe it. Not quite there yet. I thought about the audit Iris had initiated, about the recording on my phone, about everything that was coming. We were close. Iris initiated a formal financial review. It was tied to the estate's oversight provisions, a legal process that Gareth couldn't block without challenging the estate in court and explaining his decisions to a judge. Vendors submitted statements when asked. Dale provided employment records going back to my father's first hire, payroll documentation, contract signatures, the paper evidence of a company that had been built by specific people over specific years. I submitted my own emails. 3 years of management decisions documented in my name. Gareth was asked to provide his documentation. He stalled, sent angry responses to the auditor's requests, tried to meet with the accountant privately outside the formal process, attempted to have the review stopped through a letter his own attorney sent. The letter didn't stop anything. Then Iris called me on a Tuesday afternoon with something different in her voice. "You made a critical mistake," she said. My heart was loud in my chest. "What kind?" "The paperwork he submitted to support his ownership claim contains altered dates," she said. "It's detectable, forensically detectable." I sat down. Gareth wasn't just arrogant, he was careless. And carelessness was the specific crack where truth found its way in, every time. The town's annual small business banquet was 3 weeks out. Gareth had insisted on sponsoring it months earlier, had described it as good visibility for the company. He scheduled himself to speak. Of course. He sent me a message the week before. "You should come watch," it said. "Front row view of the winner." I kept my response neutral, said I'd be there. Iris said, "This is a legitimate opportunity, but it has to be clean. No confrontation, no drama, documentation only." I told Dale. He said he'd bring 2 vendors who had been waiting for an appropriate moment to say what they'd witnessed. I printed the audit summary, 4 pages, clean language, numbers, dates, the forensic flag on the altered documents noted at the top. I placed everything in a plain folder. The night before the banquet, I sat with my phone and listened to the recording one more time. Once it's in Asher's name, she can't do a thing, and her mother will sign whatever I put in front of her. I've known that since the beginning. His voice. Easy. Certain. Saying the quiet part out loud in a storage unit he'd assumed was private. I saved the recording in 3 places. Then I slept. Because tomorrow, the mic he thought was his weapon was about to become his mirror. Gareth stepped onto the stage looking like everything he wanted people to believe about him. Suit pressed, shoulders back, the practiced entrance of someone who had rehearsed the moment. He thanked the organizers, thanked the community, spoke about growth and vision and the hard work that went into building something real. Then he gestured toward my mom and Asher in the front row, like they were evidence, like their presence confirmed the story he was telling. "Some people in a family show up," he said, pausing for effect. His eyes found me in the room, "and some are just mistakes." Laughter started, thin, uncertain. I stood up, walked toward the front of the room, calmly, with the folder in my hands. The event coordinator moved toward me, questioning. I leaned close and spoke quietly. "I need 1 minute to raise a concern about the sponsor's financial conduct. I have documentation from a formal audit." The coordinator looked at the header on the top page. Her face changed. Gareth spotted me. His smile flickered. "What is she doing?" he said into the microphone, the ease beginning to crack at the edges. I stood at the side of the stage and waited, not grabbing his mic, not raising my voice, because truth didn't need volume. It needed permission, and it was about to have it. The coordinator signaled Gareth to pause. Murmurs moved through the room, the specific sound of an audience realizing something was different from what they'd been watching. Iris stepped forward beside me, calm and professional. She handed the coordinator the audit summary, indicated the forensic flag on page 3. Dale stood in the aisle. 2 vendors stood beside him. The coordinator's voice was careful and firm. "Due to documentation regarding business ownership and financial conduct under active formal review, we're suspending this portion of the program." The room went completely still. Gareth's face went red. then darker. "This is a personal attack," he said, voice rising, reaching for the authority the room had just stopped giving him. Iris said, even and clear, "It's financial documentation." Gareth moved back toward the microphone. "I built this company," he said, loud, insistent. Dale's voice came from the aisle, steady, carrying without effort. "No," Dale said, "you didn't. Her father built it, brick by brick, over 23 years, and his daughter kept it running after he died while you were taking credit for the work." People turned, eyes widening. Then my mom stood up from the front row, slowly, shaking, but standing. She said to the room, to nobody and everybody, "I didn't know what he was doing." The admission broke something open. Gareth tried to laugh. The sound that came out wasn't a laugh. The applause didn't come. People looked at him with the specific expression of someone seeing something clearly for the first time and finding the clarity uncomfortable. The performance had ended. The aftermath was quiet in the way significant things were sometimes quiet. The bank restored proper access under a state protection within 2 weeks. The altered documents triggered a formal investigation. Gareth's ability to make unilateral decisions about the business was suspended pending resolution. The tenant's eviction was reversed. She stayed in her unit. Her son stayed in his school. My mom came to my apartment with 3 bags and shaking hands. Stayed in my second room while she figured out what came next. Asher called me. Voice small. Uncertain. The voice of someone who had been inside something for a long time and had only just understood its shape. "I didn't know he was using us," he said. "Now you do," I said. "What you do with that is yours to decide." He went quiet. I gave him time. Weeks later, we began the quiet work of stabilizing what my father had built. Fair vendor payments, transparent books, the tenant's unit restored to its original rent. We didn't rebrand loudly, didn't make announcements, just worked, consistently, the way my father had worked. The next Thanksgiving, my table was smaller and completely real. My mom, Dale, 2 people who had stood up when it mattered. I served dinner and understood what my father had understood. The winner wasn't the loudest voice at the table. The winner was the one who kept showing up. Until the truth finally had a seat.